Did you? Okay. Hi, my name is Susan Brecht. I am a retired United Church of Christ pastor who came to Simi Valley 3 years ago. I'm a member of the Simi Valley Interfaith Council and the Conejo Interfaith Refugee team. And I'm glad that you are all here this evening. Thank you for coming. When I retired and moved from Newton, Massachusetts to Simi Valley almost 3 years ago now, I was introduced to Eloise, sitting right here, one of our speakers tonight, who introduced me to the Aka family, who moved here 6 years ago from Afghanistan, where Hussein was a translator for the US Army. And I've become sort of a part of their family. So as Eloise, wonderful, wonderful people. And the Conejo Interfaith Refugee team had helped their family resettle here. Hussein had planned on being here tonight, but I got a call from him early in the week that he and his wife and their baby had all come down with COVID. And so he is sparing you all from being anywhere near him, but he felt really bad because he had a lot to say and wanted to share with us. So maybe we'll find another way for him to do that. When the refugee team, after a hiatus, became active again, and when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan and refugees came pouring into our country, I joined the team along with 4 members of my church here in Simi Valley. The other night, I woke up in the middle of the night, which happens on occasion, and remembering a poem that my friend, Reverend Ann Cohen, had shared with me several years ago. And she wrote it before the crisis in Afghanistan or in Ukraine, but I thought it was fitting to share some of that poem with you tonight as we begin, before I introduce our various speakers. She entitled it, Becoming Refugees. No one volunteers to be a refugee. Migrants, immigrants, emigrants, documented or paperless, foreign or domestic, employed or unemployed. These humans make choices, often hard choices, but they choose. No one volunteers to be a refugee. Refugees have no choice. Forced to abandon home or die, forced to flee from rising tides or falling bombs, death threats or drought, driven out by child soldiers or tyrants, terrorists or tsunamis. No one volunteers to be a refugee, taking only what they can carry, taking only what they need for the journey, leaving treasured quilts and photographs, leaving books and children's drawings behind, leaving the graves of loved ones untended in once sacred ground, leaving familiar work and landscapes and horizons, leaving behind the comfortable habits of daily life and once relative safety of home, family, neighbors, village, native land. No one volunteers to be a refugee. Choosing a dream over a reality, seeking higher income or an improved educational system, reasoning that to live in a democracy would be an improvement, packing up hopes and children's and parents and for a locational benefit. These refugees are cut loose suddenly, and after gangs threatening their children. No one volunteers to be a refugee. Certainly not you or me or anyone we know in their right mind would choose such a status. Overvetted, distrusted, dependent on the kindness of strangers whose hearts vary in size. No one volunteers to be a refugee. God, open our hearts and lead us into the ways of compassion, offering to others what we already have. So this evening, we are going to talk about how we open our hearts and we feel that compassion and find out things that we can do to help those who are moving into our communities when chased out of their lands. So first, I introduce Dr. Oh, there you are. Sakina Ali, a member of the Peace Corps, and she will talk about her work at Camp Attenbury, a military base in Indiana, providing support to vulnerable Afghans, preparing them to work with resettlement agencies across the US as they resettle in our communities.
Thank you, Susan. Well, Привіт. Мене звати Sakina Ali. I always start with that. That means hello. My name is Sakina Ali. That is in Ukrainian language. I'm honored to be here because we have a lot of refugees coming in from Ukraine, but I'm also honored to be here as a representative of Peace Corps and what Peace Corps has been a part of with this whole group of Afghan refugees that have recently come in. So as many of you might know, Peace Corps is a government agency that sends volunteers abroad for 27 months to do service in more underrepresented communities. And I had that privilege to be in Ukraine in 2004 and 2005 and work amongst educators and work on their English language training programs. But today I wanted to really talk about a specific detail that I did. So in the government, a detail is just a position that you have for a limited time because they need help in a different department or different agency. So Operations Allies Welcome was something that started on August 29th, 2021. President Biden had directed the Department of Homeland Security to lead and coordinate ongoing efforts across the federal government to support these vulnerable Afghans, including those who worked alongside the US in Afghanistan for past 2 decades as they resettle here in the US. At the president's direction, the Secretary of the Homeland Security was working with representatives from across the government, which included the Peace Corps, to coordinate our response to ensure unity, a united effort to support these new people coming in. More than 40% of Afghans who arrived as part of Operations Allies Welcome are eligible for special immigrant visas. You'll hear a little bit about that later. But the multiple agencies that were part of Operation Allies Welcome was DHS, Department of Homeland Security, DOD, Department of Defense, the State Department, USAID, Peace Corps, and CDC. So we all gathered together at 9 various camps across the nation to welcome our guests. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Camp Attenbury, which is where I was located in Indiana. So Indiana had approximately 7,200 Afghan evacuees, with helping them resettle into 45 different states. Now, the first evacuees that came to Camp Attenbury started in August 29th, that very last day of August. And I actually entered the camp in October. In October, it had already been nearly 2 months that a lot of these guests were there. So it took a lot of time. There was a lot of effort to work with the refugees. Part of that was screening and vetting. So we had intelligence agencies, law enforcement, and counterterrorism professionals come in and do biometrics and fingerprinting. That was all part of the vetting process. We also administered 69,000 vaccinations to evacuees. They were all required to be vaccinated, and also got their second dose as well before they were resettled. And we also helped them with applying for their immigration status. We worked on their work authorizations and what essential coverage they would need. So that would be something that we would set up and help them before they went to their resettlement agency. So what's really important to realize there is that when I was there at the camp, I was working with strategic communication. So as we just heard from Susan, no one chooses to be a refugee. They're forced to make that choice if they do choose it, right? And so they're vulnerable, they're very scared. They don't know what is going to happen. And the population that was at Camp Atterbury, 45% of the population were kids. So most of them were uneducated or not even educated in their own language. So that was a challenge. The women, 90% of the women were uneducated in their own language. And so that was, again, another challenge. Now, most of the men worked with the US in Afghanistan. However, they were working in their own languages. So not all of them knew English as well. So we had quite a lot of work to do there, working with them every day, trying to prepare them for life here in the US. So some of the things that I was in charge of was first the strategic communication, making sure they felt welcome. The Afghan refugees felt welcome. We didn't call them refugees. In fact, we called them guests on the camp. So they were guests here in the US until they were moved on to their next area. So we delivered resettlement workshops. So part of the strategic communication for us felt like it started with the women, because women didn't get that information. We'd have all of these events and you would see a crowd of men, right? And they were going to go back and tell their women or their spouses or their children if needed, right? So we had to start with really delivering the knowledge to women. And so that's what I ended up working on. So delivering resettlement workshops, letting them know what was going to happen next. They had no idea what they were doing. No, if you don't have that language and then no one's telling you or giving you that information, it becomes really difficult to know what your future is going to hold, right? So we gave a lot of workshops telling them the process. So right now you've gone through the biometrics and your vaccinations. Now we're going to try to figure out where you're going to stay. So that was part of it. Then we provided English as a second language class. Again, that was highly attended at the beginning. And then there was this lull because people were like anxious of moving out and ready to move on. So that was a challenge because most of them were zero language learners, right? So we needed to really start with teaching them the basic skills. And some of the people that you might even encounter, might not have that English language, even the basic skills, survival skills that most people who come into the US will come with. We also provided life skills. So during a lot of the encounters that I had with the women, I would teach them about the different states, finances, talking a little bit about what to expect with their children going to school, what their responsibilities were as parents, what the responsibilities would be to a family. I used my own experience with my parents, or my parents' experience coming to the US and talking about how when they came to the US, it was a challenge. It was very different from their own country. And my mom, who I, tenderly say was a princess in her own country, she had to work. and she had to work hard when she came to the US. And it was a challenge. It was something, from going from someone who, had someone who cleaned their room to having to, plan what you're going to eat and go get everything you need, it's a difference. It's a major difference. So I talked to them about how she coped, which really, gave them a sense of feeling that they can do this and they can get through this. My background is Pakistani American, so my parents, or Pakistan is very close, obviously, to Afghanistan. So we had this kind of good relationship that we could kind of lean on each other. So that was part of the life skills that we were going through and teaching about, even what as women who are uneducated, what they could do, and what my mom did. My mom was educated up through high school, but she still, used her soft skills, I guess, that to really survive, I guess. So I told them about how she used to sew clothing, and that was her first business. She had a place down in downtown LA, and it thrived, and people were buying her clothes, and it got so popular that she even designed, bathing suits for Calvin Klein. And that was just a beginning. She ended that. She wanted to stay at home with me when I was born. So she started having a home daycare. And then I said, she left to cook. So she started her own catering business. And I told them that all of these things, all of these 3 life skills they have. A lot of the Afghan women have this. They're amazing at knitting. We'd have workshops on knitting, and all the knitting needles and all the yarn were all instantly gone, right? Because they are grabbing them up and doing something with it. And they were making beautiful shawls and blankets and sweaters and hats. And I thought, okay, well, this is great, because this is what you could do. This could be something that will help you in the next part of your resettlement process. So we did that. We had over 1,000 guests participate in also resume writing, job search, and recruitment. We talked about also how to interact with employers, because these are all things that were new to them. So that was a little bit about what I did with a lot of them, but I'm going to give you some statistics of some of the fun facts at Camp Atterbury. So there were over 1.7 million meals served to guests. We had over 49,000 visits to the recreational center that we created there, an activity space where guests participated in art therapy, soccer, volleyball, cricket, foosball, ping pong, participate in crafts, crocheting, painting, all of these things. And we received over 2.6 million donations from interfaith communities. So there was a lot of assistance right from the beginning. And I thank everyone who's been a part of that. What I was going to say, when they were participating in art therapy at Camp Atterbury, they made this beautiful mural. And it just kind of gave a trajectory of how they came to the US and what struggles they were facing before they came to the US and what struggles they imagined that they would face in the future. And this mural is now part of an art exhibit, a traveling art exhibit that goes around to every one of the US international airports. So you might see it somewhere. That came from Camp Atterbury. I have to give a shout out to those great artists that were part of that. And then when I came, my service at Camp Atterbury ended in December 2021, at the very end, right before Christmas. And when I came back, I felt like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And David had introduced me to the Conejo Valley Interfaith Refugee Team, which was just the next step for me. I thought I need to stay involved. I need to know what happens next. What is everyone going through next, and where can I help even more? So I'm honored to be part of this team, and I'm going to actually give it back to Susan. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Susan. So then you can hear a little bit more about the refugee team and what they do. Thank you.
And I'm going to introduce you to Eloise over here. She's a member of the Ascension Lutheran Church in Thousand Oaks, and she will give us an overview of immigration and the confusion in the terms describing people seeking a new home. She will give a brief summary of the formation of our Conejo Interfaith Refugee Team and how it has grown.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say that we got a couple members of our global ministries team here today, Carol and Mary, who also help in all this work. So glad to have you here. Yes, we are the Conejo Interfaith Refugee Team, and we are a local interfaith group interested in helping refugees wherever the need is. Today, as Susan said, we want to open our hearts and we ask you two questions. If your community were under siege, what help would you need or want? And secondly, if you did something in response to a crisis, what did you do and what happened as a result? We hope after today's presentation that you do open your hearts to the refugee who is our neighbor and welcome them home, knowing that we are all the same as humans. We are all belong to a mutually beneficial web of connection and well-being. There's a lot of confusion in terms used to describe people who are seeking a new home. Many confuse or misunderstand the various paths people take when they're seeking safety. As you heard from Sakina, there's a process in resettlement, and we want to begin with understanding all the categories of displaced people as recognized and defined by the UN High Commission on Refugees established in 1951. I was looking for that slide from Harriet Tubman. I had crossed the line, I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in a strange land. We are now witnessing the highest levels of human displacement on record. As of 2020, an unprecedented 70.8 million people around the world were forced from home. Among them are nearly 25.9 million refugees, over half of whom are under the age of 18. In addition to refugees, 3.5 million people are seeking asylum. This is all before the Afghanistan and Ukraine crises. In the roughly 2 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, which is longer than that now, over 5 million Ukrainian citizens, more than 1/10 of its pre-invasion population, have fled their homes and sought refuge in other countries. It's one of the fastest exoduses of refugees recorded in post-World War II history. The fact remains, though, there are millions of stateless people who have been denied a nationality and access to basic rights, such as education, healthcare, employment, and freedom of movement. So what is a refugee? A refugee is a person unable or unwilling to return to their home country due to past persecution or well-founded fear of persecution because of race, religion, nationality, social group, or political opinion. A refugee has fled their home country, crossed an international border, and has well-founded fear that their own country cannot protect them. Each refugee approved for admission to the United States is sponsored by one of 9 nonprofit resettlement agencies and are then dispersed to different parts of the United States. Then there are approximately 300 sub-agencies and sponsor circles and volunteers on top of that who assist these larger agencies in the resettlement process. And Operation Allies Welcome, who Sakina worked through, is one of those sub-agencies. Our team is a group of volunteers assisting the resettlement agency. The agency we are currently working with is International Rescue Committee, IRC. They are resettling many Afghans and others at this time in the greater Los Angeles area. The ceiling for the number of refugees the United States will admit in any one year is called the presidential determination. It is set by the executive office. The number of refugee admissions may not exceed that ceiling, but the United States is not compelled to accept that entire amount. For instance, in 2018, the United States cap was set at 45,000, but the US only resettled 22,491. The refugee ceiling in the United States was at its lowest in 2019 for only 15,000, and it is being raised to 125,000 in 2022. What's an internally displaced person, an IDP? These are persons who have not crossed a border to find safety. Unlike refugees, they are on the run at home. IDPs stay within their own country and remain under the protection of its government, even if that government is the reason for their displacement. They often move to areas where it's difficult for the UN or other agencies to deliver humanitarian assistance, and as a result, these people are among the most vulnerable in the world. And you see this in Ukraine. More than 10 million new internal displacements were recorded between January and June of 2019. Added to that, 8 million people are internally displaced now in Ukraine. Internal displacement is triggered by conflict and violence. This is the most vulnerable group because they depend on the efforts of international aid organizations. What's a migrant? A migrant is any person who leaves their country of origin to seek residence in another country. What's an asylum seeker? A person already in the US or another country who is seeking protection from being sent back to their home country. The difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker is their status. A refugee arrives in the country with status. An asylum seeker is in a legal process, hoping to be granted status to remain. LIRS is Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, and it's one of the largest of the 9 resettlement agencies in the United States. They have resettled over 500,000 refugees in the past 75 years and 15,000 Afghan allies since 2009, and I'm sure that number has gone way up. LIRS partnered with another resettlement agency in Los Angeles, IRIS, which is Interfaith Refugee and Immigration Service, during the Syrian refugee crisis. And they are the reason I became involved, and Mary and Carol, through Ascension Lutheran Church, in working with refugees, and then became connected with Conejo Interfaith Refugee Team. Since LIRS and IRIS have not been resettling in the LA area, our team is currently working with IRC, as I mentioned, International Rescue Committee. Almost all the world's great religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hindu, Sikh, Native American, Baha'i, secular humanists, encourage us to love our neighbor as ourselves, asking of us who is our neighbor, and sharing the value of welcoming the stranger among us. Or another way of saying this is welcoming those who are different than us. Most of us, regardless of our faith, believe in the common good and the golden rule, doing unto others as you would have others do for you. This beautiful teaching invites humans to treat one another the way we want to be treated. The Conejo Interfaith Refugee Team is an interfaith group interested in serving our neighbors through helping refugees wherever the need is. All are welcome to join our efforts, whether you are part of a faith community or not. Through this commitment to welcoming our neighbors and addressing the global migration crisis, Conejo Interfaith Refugee formed in October of 2015 as the Syrian refugee crisis was exploding. Our leader, Chris Soltow, and about 6 other people attended a meeting of IRIS, the interfaith group, the partner of LIRS, the Lutheran group, in Los Angeles, and Chris went back to his church, which is United Methodist in Westlake Village, to gain approval to assist refugees from his church council. This was not a political decision, but an act of service. So this small group of 6 believed in being called to do this work and that there would be strength in expanding the group to include other faith communities. So United Methodist, St. Jude's Catholic, Church of the Epiphany, Episcopalian, Temple Adat Elohim, Holy Trinity Lutheran, and Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints joined together at that time. At this same time, parallel in 2016, members at Ascension Lutheran and Emmanuel in Thousand Oaks have joined together to learn more about how they could help refugees. And they were paired through IRIS with the Aka family. And as you heard from Susan, that relationship has grown, and we continue to walk this journey with them. They, in fact, and their 2 oldest children have recently become American citizens and welcomed a sister-in-law and her 2 children into their home after the recent evacuation. So through IRIS, both of our groups learned of each other's work, and Ascension and Emmanuel joined the Conejo Interfaith Refugee Team. And it's really amazing how we've now grown. And we've added other groups. We've added People to People LA, United Church of Christ Simi Valley, Temple Etz Chaim in Thousand Oaks, Calvary Community, Islamic Center of Conejo Valley, those unaffiliated with the faith community, and we are still growing. This is a picture of a potluck that we held. We've resettled since 2016, over 26 families or individuals from Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, El Salvador, Mexico, India, Democratic Republic of Congo. We held a potluck in 2018 at Ascension. And that was to gain awareness and also raise a little money. Photos of a family receiving furniture here and offering hospitality to us in return. And although we were not active during the pandemic, as the Afghanistan crisis evolved and the refugee ceiling increased, we became active again, and we meet weekly on Zoom to plan for current needs. We are aware that Ukrainian refugees may begin to arrive in the next 4 to 6 months, and the need to welcome these new arrivals to their new home continues. Jean and Mike are now going to talk a little more specifically about the nuts and bolts of what we're doing and how to contact us.
I'm Jean Kammerer. I'm a member of Holy Trinity Lutheran Church and have been involved with the group, not quite from the beginning, but shortly after it began. And I'm not going to repeat what Eloise has said, but despite coming out of a loose coalition of faith groups responding to a crisis, we now have members of other non-faith secular groups, as well as individuals. In fact, one individual who's only loosely affiliated with a couple of different faith groups ran a tutoring program for a couple of years here to help a family. They were from Afghanistan, right? Yeah, get them up to speed, get the kids up to grade level, get the parents fluent. So we help people settle, and there's lots of ways that you can help. As Eloise said, we work with primarily with the International Rescue Committee. Fun factoid about the International Rescue Committee: it grew out of a group founded by Albert Einstein in the 1930s to help rescue Jewish people from Nazism. And it's not the same group now, it's grown and expanded, but that's something I was very happy to learn. We also have a relationship with the International Institute of Los Angeles. You may have heard that the city of Agoura Hills took, I think it was 18 families around Christmas time. And a lot of them have been resettled, but we've tried to help them in various ways. We work primarily through the agencies, but we also help people wherever they appear. And over the years, even when the borders were closed, we help people with kind of one-off aid here and there. We are 100% volunteer, and our funds are managed through the United Methodist Church of Westlake Village. And that's important because at the end, I'm going to say that if anybody wants to donate, they can. And you should know that the church manages our money so that it's all above board. So what do we do? Again, I'm not going to repeat what Eloise says, and Mike has some good stories too, but we offer welcome primarily, but we assemble supplies, things like shampoo and kitchen knives and stuffed animals and workbooks for kids and soap to take a shower with and towels, and make baskets out of these things and provide people who come with a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, a basket for a child, or even a basket for a new baby if they have one or are having one soon. And we also help with moving in supplies, furniture, lamps, computers, cell phones that we've collected. We're not actively promoting that right now because our storage is full, but anticipating a lot of people from Ukraine, we will soon be promoting that again. And Susan has some handouts in the back where you can get the address for the Sign Up Genius that we've made. The people who visit new arrived families also provide them with resources, often because they don't know the language, they don't know what's right around them. And people who show up at their house or apartment can help them navigate some of that. And that gives them a contact that they can call if they need further assistance. So let's just take a step back and follow on to something that Eloise said. So imagine if you had lived in a very dangerous or poverty-stricken or oppressed or a place where climate has changed and you can't make a living and you need to go somewhere else. Imagine the most exotic place. You can't even read anything on the street signs because even the language symbols are different. Plucked out of that environment and maybe put in a camp or a resettlement agency, or as the Afghanis who came in August in a military base in the United States for several weeks or months. I can't see it either, so don't feel that. You don't have anything with you. Maybe the clothes on your back, maybe each person in your family has one small bag. And you're in a place that you don't know anything about. What are you going to do? How are you going to survive? Most people that haven't grown up in the United States speak more than one language, but they come here and nobody speaks any of the language or dialects that they know. And so imagine if you did know everything but English, and here you are, you have only the clothes you're wearing, you'd really like to put them in a washing machine, or maybe even get some new ones. And I think what must be just terribly difficult for people is you don't know the culture. You don't know the rules our society operates by. You don't know anything about how you're going to get food. And maybe your religion or your special diet needs are very important, and you don't know how you're going to manage that here. So what are you going to need to start a new life? So I had read that there are 281 million people on the move around the world, and there's lots of different statistics. I don't know how to exactly parse that. These are people of all status who may or may not want to flee their homeland, but there are many reasons why people flee. Certainly, we know a lot. I know a lot about Ukraine now that I didn't know before. But what I didn't know, despite that I read the paper or skim it anyway, every day or two, and we watch the news, is that there are wars in Myanmar and Afghanistan and Yemen and Colombia and Ukraine, Sudan, Mexico, and Somalia. Some of these are civil wars. Some of these are wars of oppression, but there's conflict all over the world. And so there are many people on the move. They may not want to come here, but they're trying to get away from what they're facing. The other thing that's a big risk for people is climate change. They may have drought as we do. They may be experiencing flooding, which is wiping away whole towns and areas. They have crop failure and they're starving. There's poverty. My relatives came here because of poverty. And so I have heard stories about how that has affected people. Violence and gangs or religious violence. But there's lots of reasons why people are on the move, and people may show up and need our help, and we are glad to be prepared. So I'm going to turn over now a couple of minutes to Mike, or several minutes to Mike, who knows a lot about Ukraine and is going to fill us in on the history and what's happening there. And I'll be back.
Good evening. My name's Mike Lissabe. I'm from Tempelet's Hyam, and I've been working with the Conejo Valley Interfaith Refugee Welcome Team, helping to coordinate furniture delivery, actually getting all of these welcome baskets and whatnot to the refugees who have been coming through IRC and others. I'm going to talk a little bit about the crisis in Ukraine. My family were Ukrainian refugees a little less than 100 years ago. I first went to Ukraine in the late 80s, and I actually studied and did research in Ukraine in the mid 90s. And I'm telling you, what we see in the press today and the arguments that Putin has been making is the exact same thing that we've been seeing in that I studied and researched a couple decades earlier. And Susan at the beginning had said that no one chooses to be a refugee. And putting this in context, Ukraine's not a perfect state. It's got corruption, it's got problems, but it had been headed in a democratic direction. And I want to make clear to everybody, because I'm kind of passionate about this, please know that this is a war of choice, and the choice was entirely on the part of Russia, and Ukraine's made mistakes, but nothing they have done and nothing the people there have done instigated or was a basis for this war. There is an independent Ukrainian state. As you heard a little bit of Ukrainian earlier, and Ukrainian is a very different language, different literature. There is the Ukrainian polity. And so I know there are a lot of things in the press and people who haven't been studying this for decades. It can be confusing, but this is completely a war of choice in a European nation that has 44 million people. That's a pretty large nation. And right now, because of the war, 1/3 of the residents, 1/3 of the people in Ukraine are either refugees, they left the country, or they're displaced persons, where they can no longer live in their homes. They have to find a new place to live. They've gone west to Lviv or to Kyiv. And you stop and you think about that. Imagine in California, 1/3 of the residents in California having to leave the state, or if you're in Southern California, you have to go up to San Francisco. 1/3 of the state. That's what's happening in Ukraine right now. And where they're going in Europe, Europe has so generously opened up their arms. It's been wonderful, but a majority are ending up in Poland and Moldova and Hungary, and these aren't always, you know, these aren't entirely open societies if you follow Hungarian politics. But the US has pledged that we're going to take in 100,000 refugees. What we're seeing now here locally are some refugees who have made it through Mexico and made it through the borders, people who have had, local contacts, and so we have not really been engaged with that population because they're coming to homes and they're coming to families and friends. But as was said, we expect over the summer and into the fall, the Ukrainian refugee wave is going to start coming in, and we're hoping to be ready for that. Just wanted to, I know we're running out of time here. I want to say that we have a unique role here. We're this interfaith religious group, and as was discussed earlier, we have in all the Abrahamic faiths, we have an obligation to welcome the stranger, which is to welcome immigrants, welcome refugees, and make sure that they can integrate into our society. In addition, with Ukraine, we have a unique obligation because in 1994, Ukraine became the only country in history to give up its nuclear weapons. And the reason they did that is because the US and Great Britain agreed with Russia to maintain the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And when Ukraine was invaded in 2014, because the current war started in 2014, we stepped back from the Budapest Memorandum. So I think that as Americans, we do have a moral obligation here to step up and do the right thing. As a country of refugees, I think all of us can look back on our ancestors who made it here and hopefully try to make the transition as easy as possible. One quick word, you know, we, in addition to helping with the refugees, we can also put up with the economy a little bit longer. The war in Ukraine is affecting all of us at the gas pump. It's affecting inflation. And it's difficult, and it's hard for me, and it's hard for a lot of families. But do realize that what we do here in maintaining these sanctions and living through these harder times for us is going to make the difference in whether or not we have a democratic Ukraine going forward or an emboldened authoritarian state, actually states, because if Russia is successful here, North Korea, China, Iran, all these other countries are going to be looking at that as an example of what can be done. So that I'm stepping away from Ukraine. If anyone has any questions about Ukraine afterwards, I'd love to chat with you. Getting back to the Conejo Valley refugee team, we have a delivery team. So I wanted to, we talked a lot here about why we should be helping refugees. I want to talk a little bit about why you might want to be interested in working with this delivery team. Every week we wait, and IRC will tell us we have 1, 2, 3 families and here's where they are. And every week we call up and we say, okay, who's in the family? What are their needs? Do they have kids? Do they have elderly people? Is there some special issues with the family, anything we can help with? And every week we get a different response. Last week it was, well, this family, they don't have a car, they really want to get around and they could use some bikes. So the delivery team reached out to the greater group and said, we're trying to get 3 bikes and helmets for kids. It was 14 15 and 18. And immediately there were like 4 people responding, okay, I think I know where we can get a bike, we can get some helmets, and working with the delivery team is just, it's such a wonderful experience for us, because our community, our greater community in the Conejo Valley is just so giving. We get these last minute requests, and people reach out to people who reach out to people, and suddenly, you know, the gates fly open, and the generosity that we have in our hearts just pours forth. And so if you get involved with the delivery team or with the refugee team, it's a wonderful antidote to watching the news or following what's happening, especially with what's happening, you know, this week. What we deliver, I think we've gone through a lot of this. The one thing that I would add is when we make the deliveries, we often answer just the most random questions. People will want to know, where can I do laundry? And that you describe what a laundromat is. I mean, there are so many opportunities to help bridge the culture in the little couple hours that we're there. And then when we make the delivery, we're going in, and it will be an empty 2-bedroom apartment, which we fill with furniture and with the welcome kits. And so you come in and it's bare wood, and you leave and it's a furnished apartment. And the gratitude is palpable. And these guests, you know, they really have nothing, very little beyond, you know, some clothes and a few personal items. And yet, when you make the delivery, they will go out of their way to open up their homes and invite you in. And what little they have, they're going to try to share with you and share their gratitude. So the impact here, you can really see it and you can feel it, and it's overwhelming. And at times, you know, I say sometimes there's a numbness. You know, as we've said, you know, these people are going through days or months or years of living in between. And so sometimes you do come upon people who are just numb, and they're just not really communicative, or they can't express. And so you do see a little bit of everything, but the impact we make is incredible. So that is it, and from me.
So I will just finish up so that we can get everybody out at a reasonable hour. We are all willing to stay and talk about this if you have questions or comments. Things that we have current need is one of the things we need is muscles to help with the delivery teams. We have several trucks and vans, although I'm sure that we could use more if anybody has a truck or a van. But we need young, strong people, high school age and up, that are willing to give a Saturday part of a day, Saturday or Sunday. Some deliveries are on Sunday. And just let us know at cvirefugee@gmail.com. Also, the other critical shortage we have is of housing. And that's not just here, it's nationwide. But it's a barrier for folks who come because they may not even have credit history. As some people who came from Afghanistan were advised to destroy their documents so that the Taliban wouldn't know who they were. So to get here, to get a job, you need documents. And to go through the asylum process, you need documents, but people don't have any. And then to go to work, you need documents. And it's kind of a catch, and they have to go to work within a certain number of weeks. So they're kind of in a catch-22, but housing and jobs we need people that are willing to work with IRC, landlords, with affordable housing. And we need people that are willing to give a refugee a chance. Now, many of the people who come may have halfway decent educations, but they're not able to practice dentistry or ophthalmology or teach in a class without good English skills, and they're not able to get certified in their chosen profession until they've been here a while, have good English, probably have to go back to school and learn how it's done here. So people are in kind of a catch-22, and if anyone knows of a landlord or a job, let us know at cvirefugee@gmail.com and someone will get back to you. Another thing we need are translators. We have several that speak Dari, Pashto, and Farsi, but there are other languages from the Middle East that if someone knows some of the dialects, let us know and we'll put you on a list to when we need someone. We always like cash, and if you're motivated to donate, that can go to UMCWV, United Methodist Church, Westlake Village. My next slide, I'll blow that up a little bigger so you can see it. And the other thing we like are gift cards. We like to give people a gift card to Target, so maybe they can buy that new set of clothes, or Trader Joe's or a grocery store. Those are things that we need. And you can get a hold of me at Refugee HTLC, Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, and I'll come get them and make sure that Mike and the team has them, and I'll arrange to pick them up for you. So the United Methodist Church, Westlake Village, is at 1049, and there are handouts in the back with this information. But write Refugee Fund on the check. If you go to the website for the church, page down to the bottom for the donate button on the left, and then page down to the bottom of that button, and you'll find the refugee team. It's a little bit cumbersome to find it. They don't come out front and ask you for money at that church. But there is a special fund for the refugee team, and you can find it on their website. So if you have any questions or comments, I'm going to turn it back over to Susan, and she can finish up. But thank you for your attention.
Just brought to my attention, one other thing we are in need of is when people are wanting to give us like a whole apartment full of furniture because they're moving, nice furniture. We've been storing things at our church here in Simi, but we only have half of a garage, and it's not enough. So I started going online this week and looking for other places, the self-storage units. If anybody has contact with anybody who owns or runs one of those, let us know. We're trying to see if we could rent space for like even 6 months at a reduced rate. Or if somebody who has a garage or something that they aren't using and could store it here. But it seemed like at this point to have a storage unit that the people that, like Mike, who are doing the, going and picking up furniture and taking it, where you had one, key into that storage unit, it would make it and everything in one place up here. We also have a garage that we use sometimes down in Thousand Oaks. So that's another need that we have right now. I've left in the back flyers and a sign up if you want to get involved in some way, putting your name down and your contact info. And if you have a specific thing you'd like to be doing, getting involved, write that in there too, along with your name, and we will be in touch with you. And then there is also flyers that have all the information. If you would like to write a check and send it to the Methodist Church, that would help. I mean, we bought, how many of the laptops did we buy? How many? 70? Something like that from one of the schools that were selling them for $8 a piece. And we, with some of the money that was coming in, we were able to buy like 70 of them. And we've kept some to give out to families and sent a whole lot more to IRC, who we're so grateful for them because they're dealing with families that are being settled in areas that are too far for us to go to. So many different ways that that can help. And just. What? We meet on Zoom. Oh, yeah. We also, our group meets on Zoom every Monday at 4 o'clock. And that, so if you want to come to one of the meetings, find out more, see what we're doing, give us your contact info, let us know, and we will put you on our list and get in touch with you. And spread the word, spread the word to others that you know. Is there, I know we're a little over time, but we started late too, as people came in. Does anybody have questions? If you do, we can pass you a mic or you can talk to one of us afterwards. If you have a question you want to right now, raise your hand. If not, okay, I hope you will, some of you will sign up. I hope you'll take some flyers. There also, oh, that's the other thing. You didn't mention about the support group, the what? The support circle? Yeah, support circle.
I'm not, we don't know enough.
We don't know enough. I did, we're working with IRC right now and others trying to figure out, they would like some support circles for people. You hear like Ukrainians are coming over and they want a group to sponsor them or a person to sponsor them. So there is some information about that back there, but we are still exploring different agencies and how to do that. It's costly and time consuming and takes a lot of people. But anyway, more info there too. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Okay, there were 18.